Okay, and welcome to season 2 of the Ignite Your Mind podcast. And to start off, I have got two powerful humans. I don't, as I was just saying before, I don't really know how this is going to go, but I know this is going to be a powerful conversation, whatever it is. So, without further ado, I wanted to introduce Alexa Taylor and Helen Victoria. How are you both?
Hello.
Good. Right. So both of these humans, sorry, I relate to people as humans these days. So I just find it's a bit more of a powerful statement. Both of these lovely humans do powerful things and wonderful things, but have also been through both traumatic experiences. But because of that, you know, everything happens for a reason, and now they're doing what they're doing. So I really wanted to get both your stories and just have an open discussion on what's happened, where you've come to, why you're there, and how you got there, really. So Helen, let's start off with you.
Hello. So I run a social enterprise called Living Liberty, and it's all about freedom, hence the title, Living Liberty. And it grew from a blog. So I started a blog all the way back in 2012, when it was still not really a thing that people did, but I just sort of started this process of writing to sort of document my process of healing and to sort of write about the possibilities of life beyond a domestic violence situation, which is something I just left behind at that point in my life. Mm-hmm. And then just over the years it grew, and I grew a really lovely community around it. And then last year I retired from my performing career as a dancer and launched it as a social enterprise. And then I've just been kind of working out what that means ever since, and sort of seeing what I can do with sort of energy behind the movement thing. And I think that's what I do. So my work's all about empowering people to make better choices in their relationships, and I teach all about healthy relationship habits and how to build healthy relationships. It's not necessarily just warning people about what can go wrong, it's also equipping people with the tools to sort of create healthy relationships. Yeah, that's what I do.
I mean, there's one thing that struck me about your Instagram and Living Liberty and what you do is that you're when it comes to, like, I don't even really want to call it promotion, maybe your story or your journey, you're so like free spirited. When you're doing your little videos, like there was one of you dancing in the car, and I must have watched it like 20 times. Everyone's seen it. I don't know why, but it was like one of those moments where I was like infatuated by what the hell was going on, and I thought that was amazing. So yeah, I mean, credit where credit's due, like fair play to you. But talk us through sort of earlier, before you started the blog, like just a brief sort of explanation of what happened, just so people that are listening are going to get a picture of who you are, really, and what's happened.
So I back when I was 15, I'd met my first boyfriend, and basically it's sort of, I was in a relationship from the ages of 15 till I was 23. Mm-hmm. And that relationship was what I thought was really great in the first couple of years. And then he and I bought a house together. We're really young, but we managed to buy a house together. And then things changed. So I turned from sort of being a fairly carefree teenager, sort of going to college and sort of fitting in with my friends, to sort of finding myself in a really severe home situation, living with this person that everybody was congratulating me on, of, you know, what a lovely boyfriend you've got, he's such a nice guy, look, you bought a house, look, you're so lucky. But behind closed doors, I was suffering a lot of emotional and physical abuse from him. And I actually stayed living in that house for 4 years with him, sort of on the belief that things could maybe get better, or that I could fix it. But it just got worse and worse. And in the end, it came to a really sort of violent end. And thankfully, I found my freedom. And I was just at the point then when I'd been training as a dancer, but he was never going to let me be a performer. And I had a year left of dance college. So, you know, at 23, I was sort of at this crossroads of sink or swim, and dance became my total lifeboat. Like, without it, I don't know where I'd be. And I just threw myself into it and just trained as hard as I could, and then managed to get my first contract dancing in Morocco, and then it just sort of went from there. So it was a really horrendous time. And you're right in that I do share all of my work. I try and sort of inject positivity into it, but not so much that it becomes sort of false or numb in some way. It's like
fake.
You know,
yeah,
like
yeah.
it was really awful, and I still suffer now with panic attacks, and I still have anxiety, and I still am working through PTSD, and that's still part of my life. But
that's so important. Sorry
Yeah.
to cut you off there, but like honestly, that's one of the things that I found recently. It's like, it's so great to be able to put out that positive energy, but it's also like, it doesn't mean that you're not still healing. And there's so many things like I'm learning at the moment, like, wow, actually I didn't realize I do that. Like this disassociation thing is like still new to me, and I'm like, oh my god, that's so me, and now I actually understand why. But I think sometimes as soon as you start giving out that positive energy, you can even learn more about yourself, and it's just so important, and just lovely that you do that for like your community and for yourself. So
and I think it is all, it's like, as with all of us really, are on a continual journey of working things out as we go along. Like no one arrives on the planet with a guidebook. Like we're all working out as we go along. And so and I wrote an article called I'm living happily ever after, so why can't I breathe, like ages ago, and that's kind of what launched my blog in the end, because a lot of people found my work because of that article. And it was all about the fact that at the time I was living in New York doing some modelling and loving my life, and it was all really great on the surface, and those elements were great, but I was also suffering with a hell of a lot of depression. I was really suffering in the quiet moments. And so I wrote this article about how one morning I'd done this photo shoot in Central Park, and it had been this ballet shoot, and it was like so incredible. And then on the subway on the way home, I just had this massive hyperventilating messy panic attack. And I went home, slept the rest of the day, and by the evening the photographer had sent me the photos, and I'm looking at myself like in a fountain, like in a tutu, being like, how this doesn't add up, because I think I thought it was either there's bad or there's good, and actually I sort of was a turning moment where I realized actually we all have varied experiences, and you might have just because you've got a brilliant career doesn't mean that everything else is okay, and actually trauma generally needs looking at. And I was spending a lot of time ignoring what was happening to me and my mental health, because I just thought, well, if I can keep being successful and if I keep being great at the thing, then it'll all be fine.
Escapism, right, of actually how you're feeling. No, you're completely right. That is that you're just trying to escape how you're feeling and trying to put it to one side but really you're actually making it worse, and it's having more of a detrimental effect on it. I mean, Alex, like hearing that, I got quite emotional hearing that, to be fair. Like I was literally like, at one point where you said he wouldn't let me dance or something, or he wouldn't let me do, what was it? Would he not let you?
He didn't like any, and actually I was training ballet. Ballet is not very sexy, but he was just not a fan of me being a leotard or being around male dancers. He didn't want me to, even I used to teach baby ballet, and he was like, well, who are the parents? Who's going to meet? And it's like, I'm like, teaching baby ballet on a Saturday morning is really not a threat to a relationship. So,
do you know what? The first thing that comes into my head when you said that was like, who the hell says I can't do something? Like, especially your partner, right? Your partner's supposed to boost you up and give you like the complete opposite. That's what comes in my head. Oh man, that got me a little bit emotional. I mean, Alex, like I mean, just hearing that, like, can you resonate with any of that at all?
Oh my gosh, I mean, literally there's so many little things that I was picking up on when you were talking that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna say something. No, wait. Oh my gosh, like you said about the whole, just if you can be successful, keep going and stuff like that, and not addressing it. I think I am just the epitome of that. Like as soon, and it's actually only been recently, I'd say probably like the last year, I've really realised that that's what I was doing. That I used to work like 5 nights a week, 5 days a week. I have like a sleep consultancy business, and then I used to do the modelling, and I would literally do a night shift, and I'd have like 30 minutes sleep, and then I'd go on to do a shoot all day, and I'd go straight back to work. And at the time I was like saying to myself, oh, it's because I want to be successful at both, and like I need to do the night nannying to create the income to do the modelling. And then actually when I take a step back, and when I actually started to slow down, everything just came out, and I was like, whoa, what is this? And it was really overwhelming. But then I was a bit like, oh shit, actually that's what it is. It's because I was just running away from it all the time. And it's so funny because like certain people that I work with, there's a family that I used to work with once a month at the weekends, and she actually works with trauma. And I think even she could see it, and she would sort of like say little things, but I was just still so blindsided because I was like, no, it's fine, I'm great, and this is me just actually like, I can handle this, and what happened to me just doesn't even matter. And it's like, when you actually stop and look at it and realise how your trauma is affecting you, it's quite it's almost like it's like a wall, and you've hit that wall, and it's like, wow, actually I've got to stop now, like, and I've actually got to deal with it. And I think that was like a really hard part, because it's like, oh, actually this has happened and it's time to address it properly. So
it's hard because that positive, like, because the thing is, you obviously got a lot of joy out of what you're doing as well, and that's what's a tricky balance, is actually that, you know, that was a vehicle for you to move on, but then it's like, it's to a point where it's too much of
it was unhealthy. It was so unhealthy.
An escape to, you know, there's having escapism, and then there's running away, and it's really hard to define that.
Because I do genuinely love both my jobs, and I would always say that to people. I'm like, I love what I do, but then when I stopped and I realised, I was like, oh, actually no, I was using those as a way to be able to just constantly be away from my reality, because especially with doing the modelling, that always gave me like a confidence that I felt I couldn't have at home, because at home I was very much in the thing of like, oh, this is what I've been going through, and it was almost like a reminder. So it was like being away from home, and, you know, doing the night nannying. I love babies, and like I was always meeting new people, so I could just be myself. I could just be who I was, because people didn't know what I'd been through. So it was like I could now just be whatever I wanted to be, not just this person that's gone through what I've been through. And it was just like, it's tough to know the difference, like you say. But
do you reckon there's like an element of denial in everyone? Like, I think we were speaking, Helen, on the Let's Talk with Matt and Johnny podcast, big up the boys. You were saying, I think you mentioned that in terms of like a narcissist, I think everyone is a narcissist at some point in their life, and probably without even knowing it. But I think it's the same with denial. Like, I've been in denial for a whole load of stuff, but sometimes I'm just too scared to admit it.
Well, sometimes it is a coping mechanism, and I think, you know, sometimes we do need, you know, I don't know, people have different vices, like, and it sometimes can be hard to divide which is healthy and which is not. And actually, but every day is different. So, you know, if something becomes too intense, or you don't, you know, it's not the right place or the right time to unpack something, I think it's okay to, you know, throw yourself into something and to shut off from it. But I think it's just if you're consistently doing it, and you know, mental health changes every day, and it's not a journey of, I think I waited for years for this like movie moment epiphany where I would feel better, like, as in, you know what, I'm gonna get my dream dance contract, and then I'm just gonna, you know, like, and they like have like a makeover and everything's great. I think I was waiting for that for ages, and then I was like, oh, this is like a really slow, gradual
you know, oh my god, I know that feeling.
It's, you know, and actually, one, you know, there's been lots of small gradual turning points in my sort of recovery process, and, you know, I'm now 32, so it's like 9 years ago that I sort of started this journey with Liberte and like with the work I'm doing, and, you know, it's taken a long time to be able to talk about it and process it and unpack it, and it's okay to take your time. And I think, you know, and I think it's also important to define for yourself what's right for you, because it's really easy, and I know I spent a lot of years listening far too much to sort of outside voices, or having that sort of comparison element of like, but they feel better, or they seem to be coping okay, or well, they're fine in like a busy room, so why am I panicking? And actually, what's right for you, generally your gut instinct is your compass for knowing what's right for you. And that is like the most integral thing, like the most important thing I like so into all of my work, is talking about gut instinct, because we are all issued with really good instinct somewhere, and often we can shut that voice down, or think, no, but I want to do that, so I'm just going to ignore my instinct that this isn't right. And it's always going to come back to bite you. And, you know, when people say to me, well, how do I know if it's an unhealthy relationship? Generally, if they're asking that question, there's probably something that's not right.
100%.
You're asking me. And also, it's just, you know, listening to what's right. So if you know, like, I know that if I tend to go overboard with exercise, so I will train until I'm like on the floor because I can't do it anymore. And I know that's not healthy. I know I need to rest. I know I need to take time out. And I know really when I'm doing it, but it's easy to say, well, I didn't realise I was doing it. I really like exercise. But actually, if you listen to your inner voice and actually sit with yourself for a minute, most of the time you have the answers yourself. And we tend to Google up for answers a lot of the time, but actually often you have the answers yourself.
Yeah. Do you know what? That's very similar to like when I'm coaching. Like I can't give my clients answers. The answer needs to come from within. But it's just me being that facilitator to ask the right question to get that answer out of them. So everyone has their own answer. Everyone has their own decisions in life or their own thoughts in life, but they have all the answers. You're so right. You're so right. Alex, just for people listening, could you tell us a little bit about TTC and how that came about and why that came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, by the way, it's really weird that you're calling me Alex.
Alexa. What do I usually call you?
You normally call me Alexa, which is why I'm like, where's it calling me Alex?
No, I call you Alex. I call you Alex. I don't know. Anyway,
no,
sorry. Me, myself and Alexa have known each other.
Off on a tangent there, but
no, we've known each other for about 10 years. Sorry. Carry on anyway.
So basically, TTC, which is the Trauma Champions, is a fairly new adventure, I'd say. For myself, but it's something I think I've had like in my mind and sort of like on the cards for probably like 4 years now, and I do think it's true to say, like what you were saying, like there's a time, like I think there becomes a time that you know when like certain situations are right for like you and your healing and stuff like that, because I try to sort of do some of the things that I'm doing now with the Trauma Champions, and I would then have like relapses, and at the time I still felt so passionate about sort of empowerment, and that's the idea behind the Trauma Champions is empowerment and self-love for survivors of rape and sexual assault. And for me it was like I knew that that was something that really worked for me on my journey, but I wanted to be able to share it with others, and I kept trying to sort of like not force it, but I was like, I need to do this, I need to get out there. And then as soon as I started, I was like, oh God, no, like I am not ready for this. Like it's not the right time and place. But I knew it was always something I felt like I not necessarily needed, but I definitely wanted to do. So how that came about anyway is that I'm a survivor. It's now been 8 years, which was crazy actually. Like when I think about it now, I think I'm so like with it and together, and I'm like, gosh, I was like 21 when it happened to me, and it was just like, it's really crazy to think where those 8 years have gone. But I was, I guess, one of those what I felt like was statistic, because it happened on like a drunken night out, and trying to sort of like, you know, put like, I don't know what the word is. Oh, what's that word? It's like compartmentalize, is that the word? Sort of like what had happened, what I should do to make this right, and everything like that. It was a very, and then we had to be very quick decision making. It's like, okay, well, you know, that's happened, so you can't shower. And it's like, you have to really think on your feet. And like when you're in a state of shock, and I actually do think I was in like a bit of denial, because it's like I was a little bit like, did that happen? Like, oh my God, like, fuck, that's just happened. Like, and that was like
really questioning yourself, don't you?
Oh my gosh, yeah, because it's like you have to really try and think straight when you're in shock, and it's then like you do kind of start questioning yourself. But I knew what happened, and it was very much like, okay, like I do feel like I need to do the right thing. But that was then going to the police, and I reported it, and had 2 court trials because the first one was hung. So it was like a very long journey for like the first 2 years of it.
I just pause you a second, because I know you've spoken about this before, but talk to me about the system, this stupid system that we're in. But no, because the reason why I'm asking that is because I've been watching a lot of documentaries recently and a lot of docuseries. I'm trying to get my head around, I'm trying to educate myself around what the hell this system is about, and why this Me Too movement is happening, and why, you know, people are not getting justice for what's happened to them. And it just sounds like a very confusing place to be in.
So like I've literally got like goosebumps with you raising that, because I think that is probably one of the, like, you see people say it, but it's actually probably the hardest part you go through. And that is why truly people don't report it, because they hear what happens to people, and it's like you'll hear it from stuff that you see shared online or, you know, in the news and stuff like that, and it's kind of like it happens, and it's like, do I really want to go through that? Like, would I just be better just dealing with it in my own way? Because you're still going to have to deal with it regardless if you go through the court process. So it honestly, like, it's true what they say, like, it's the only situation where you are made to feel like you're the bad person, and they will literally throw everything. Like, my life was just torn to pieces. Like, every single aspect about me was the cause of what happened to me, and I'm like, are you, like, excuse me, are you fucking kidding me? Like,
wait, and you were 21 as well, right?
Yeah, 22 by the time.
You're a young girl, like, you're not.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. That's it. You're a young girl, you got drunk, you made a mistake and you regretted it, so therefore, like, it didn't happen. Like, that's their take on it. And because I do modelling, I was wearing high heels and a short dress, and they were like, that's why you can't walk straight. I was like,
what? So that makes it okay, does it?
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, apparently.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
and that's why I've got such a complex about being a model now, because it's like, I asked for it. Like, it wasn't even a case of that I asked for it. Like, that's not what they obviously say, but that was my interpretation. It's like, well, you can use that against me in court, so therefore that means it's a really bad thing about me. So it's like, do you know what I say to myself? It's like, if someone gets burgled, you're not going to turn around and say to them, well, you left the window open, you asked for it.
Yeah.
Like, oh my
give
God.
you permission to burgle me. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like,
it's just, people look, the whole system is just, I don't even know how I can begin to dissect the things around it, because I don't have the answers. Like, I don't know who has the answers. I don't know what. For me, I think, in some sense, I try and have to look at it in two ways. And I think this is one of the things that, like, I am still dealing with at the moment is, or just, I don't know, as I go on, is I feel in one sense really fortunate that we got to go to court. Like, there are a lot of girls and, you know, people that go through this that will report it, but they're never taken, it's never taken further. There isn't enough evidence, or there's something they just feel like, oh, there's just not a chance. And the process, how it works, is it will go to magistrates first, and either something will happen to magistrates, and then the next process is Crown Court. They went to magistrates were like, no, you need to go, this needs to go to trial. And when that happened, I was like, shit, I was like, we can actually get him. Like, oh my God, this could work, this could happen. Like, so then went to Crown Court, and like that process, and like, I was not prepared for that. And they can't, because otherwise it's seen as coaching, and like, I get it, but at the same time, like, nothing I think really can prepare you for what you're about to go through. And for me, after I'd gone through both my my court trials, and I then went through therapy, or I went through counselling, and did various things to sort of like try and help heal myself. It wasn't until I did an empowerment day that I then really felt like, wowzers, like, I actually feel so much better about myself. And I'll go, I guess, more into detail on that. But I then was like, can I create, I went back to my old counselling service for crisis, and I said to them, can I create an empowerment sheet for the girls going through court? Because I said, the way that they're going to make that person feel is just horrendous. Like, it is true that going through the court process on many levels is worse than what you actually just went through. So it's like, girls, or, you know, people, just women who go through that process, like, I feel like they just need something, and if you can't give them guidance, just give them empowerment. Like, they need something. And this was one of the things that actually Rape Crisis, they said they'd fund it, they would do it, and then I started to do it, and I just then went straight back into that place of being in court, that I then couldn't continue it. So I was like, I need to stop. And that was like 4 years into my journey. So that, you know, still quite a few years after I'd gone through it. And it is amazing how things can re-trigger you.
That power behind that, like the fact that even amongst like your, like, obviously an intense amount of pain, you have had this huge injury to your life, and not only just one injury, but now like several others that are starting to crop up and continue with court and everything else. And amongst all of that, your thought process goes to other women rather than just what's happening to me. That's incredible. Like, and of course, like, it's been really overwhelming, and like, I'm so glad that you have, like, obviously continued your healing journey, but it is so powerful that was where your mind went to, like, was immediately like, well, how do other women feel in this situation, and how will they feel like in a few months' time? Like, I think that's amazing.
Thank you. Well, I guess likewise, that's obviously how your blogging started. Like, and I do think there is something to be said for being able to share what you have learned or what you know, to be able to help others. Like, I've definitely always been that kind of helping person anyway. Like, I think that's why my sleep consultancy business started, because I was like, how can I help parents? Like, that's literally just always been my character. But it was just more that I just felt like it was so lacking. Like, wowzers, like, it's not until you're on the other side that you do realise like what it is. And it's crazy.
Like, the age you were at, obviously you were like 21, and like actually one of the main reasons I set up my blog and I started writing was because I felt at that time, incorrectly, but like at the time I felt like I was the only young woman that was going through something like that. Because like all my friends were just like at uni, they're on gap years, like having various, you know, life challenges and what was happening, but I couldn't relate. Like, we were in such different places. And then when I was looking online, the information that I found from sort of like guessing and stumbling through the internet, a lot of it was for sort of middle-aged women, or for people, you know, there was like refuge spots for people that had children, but if you didn't have a child, or if you didn't fit a certain age bracket, I didn't apply. And I think I just made this assumption from that I was the only young person, and you know, an abusive relationship tends to teach you that it's your fault, so that just sort of further fueled the sense of like, am I just overreacting, am I actually just making this a big deal and it's not? And so I think I started writing because I thought, like, you know, if somebody else will have gone through this, I want them to be able to go on the internet and find somebody that they can relate to, that's like, that they think, well, actually, yeah, that I am going through something similar, and she did as well. So that means that it is like a valid like thing that's happening. It's almost like you doubt your own judgment on something, and it's like you can start to, you know, and obviously with court and everything, essentially the question mark over the whole thing is this true or is this not? Because that's like the process of court, which, you know, you have to, like, being able to process that of like, was I right or was this wrong? Did I react? Was it really? Like, you shouldn't even have to go to those places, but that sort of makes that happen from the process of court. And it's, you know, and it's a really complicated thing to unpick, and I think we could probably be here for a couple of hours talking about court. So, I think when I was like working out what I was going to do with Living Liberty to make it a social enterprise, and I decided that sort of relationship education was, prevention was what I was most passionate about and could speak the most about. But there was a point where I was like, well, maybe I want to base it around educating the police about how to handle domestic violence victims, like not interviewing in front of them and interviewing them or asking them questions in front of the abuser is probably a good place to start. And you know, I ended up I managed to get a meeting with Theresa May a couple of years ago, and actually spoke like after like a year of like campaigning to speak to her, ended up with like a 10-minute slot. They were like, right, you've got 10 minutes to talk to her. And because I wanted to talk to her about how the police handle, you know, these cases, and the fact, you know, it's not, a lot of the time, police constables, they're not trained, so like they don't know about domestic violence. It's not even sort of their fault to a certain extent, but they're the people that are on the front line dealing with people like you and I who are like, hey, this thing just happened. And then, you know, they're not trained therapists, they're not counsellors, they're not necessarily equipped to know. And so but then I realised I have to sort of pick my battles, and I can't actually take on like so many different things. And it's hard because obviously when you've been in so many different circumstances, you feel passionate about making a lot of change. But I'm like, where I need to stick to, but otherwise, you know, I watch all those documentaries as well, like about, like you were just saying, and it's like, it's hard to not get fired up about every cause.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I know we spoke the other day about that R. Kelly one. Just like, I just get so like how I just get baffled, right? Of how I never knew about this stuff, and I'm now like starting to educate myself about this stuff, and I'm really just so confused on how people get away with such like intense scenarios. It's not even like they're doing a light crime. This is like a really heavy, deep crime. Like, this is literally changing someone's life forever, like numerous lives.
I think that's part of the denial thing, actually, because like what we were talking about earlier about denial is what we don't as individuals, we don't necessarily like to admit what's happening because it's frightening. It's hard to think, well, actually this person, I love them and they're abusing me, and that's actually happening. And so you can deny it and push things away, or think, well, actually no, I don't have a mental health problem, it's okay. But we also can do it for people that we want to like. So like in the case of R. Kelly, people love his music, he releases great songs, whatever, and people don't want to change their opinion because whether it's sort of ingrained in them or they're conscious or otherwise, they don't want to change their opinion. And in the case of my ex-partner, he was an extremely successful, very charismatic, very handsome, likable guy. So people would meet him, think he was great, and you know, he did really well with his career, and you know, people would meet him and they'd be like, oh, you know, he's so great, isn't he? And like, oh, it's so great.
Did you find that so hard?
Yeah, it's like, because you want to say, but he's not always like that. And you know, there were occasions where, you know, he would, you know, if somebody came to visit, and he would just switch and he would change, and like his whole approach was, you know, well, you're the one that's upsetting me, I'm not normally like this. And over, you know, years and years, that's part of the thing of gaslighting and emotional manipulation, is you start to believe it and you think, yeah, he really is only like this when he's around me, so it must be me. And it's like with the R. Kelly thing, I think so many people wanted, you know, they had all those fans outside court, and then he ended up abusing one of his fans that was supporting him in the court case. It's like,
Oh,
insane.
this is madness.
And releases this song like, I Believe I Can Fly, but you flipping can. Like, that's it.
Oh,
Like, nobody's making him accountable. So
mate.
it's hard when there's, you know, because, you know, you want to see, people see abusers, or they think of rapists as like ogres or these big monster people, like, you know, they've got a trench coat and they drag you into an alley. And it's like, actually, you know, in sexual assault, a lot of the times it's someone they know, and, you know, and people don't want to believe that it could be someone that they're close to or that they see every day, or, you know, and often narcissistic abusers are people in power. So they're people that are very engaging and very charismatic, they're very influential, and that's why it's dangerous when they get to the top, because then they have the ability to abuse. So it's knowing the signs, which is part of what I teach in my work, and sort of being able to check in with whether behaviours actually are okay. And, you know, if you're becoming overwhelmed, I talk a lot about love bombing and being knocked off, you know, people say it's called swept off your feet with romance, but actually that's essentially being knocked off your balance. Like, it's not necessarily a good thing to be swept off your feet. It's great to be loved and to have a romantic experience, and that's amazing, and that shouldn't be taken away. But if someone's suddenly overwhelmed you and your whole life has changed within days of meeting them, that's not necessarily a good sign. And so just all that awareness, really, that I did not have when I was 15. So
well, this is interesting, right? I think you just brought up something very, very interesting. Both of what you two do, and this is just from an outsider's perspective, I still think is a very taboo subject. And I don't think it's spoken about enough. I was speaking to someone else on my other podcast about money and debt. And money, same thing, taboo subject, being in debt. No one really want to talk about it. Like, but it's not. It's actually quite a frequent, common thing. And so, like it is with you two in your both situations. And I think that in itself is really frustrating too. And this is why I do these podcasts, right? Because I'm trying to get more out there, more and more out there.
I think that's what the hard part is, though, isn't it? Because it's like, especially when you're when you've been on that side of it, you're then like, everybody needs to know about this, and then it's kind of like, the more you talk about it, everybody does, and it's like everybody knows someone, or everybody knows someone who's been through the same thing, and it's like, but why is this still happening? And like, that's the thing that I think I get so frustrated about, and I've had to kind of pull myself back a little bit, because since launching the Trauma Champions, I am like what's the word, like, not blown away, but like the amount that is out there that people will talk about actually rape culture and sexual assault, and actually what, you know, amounts to those things, and what people still believe. I am like, I then get argumentative with these people, and I'm like, I've got to stop, because that's like what you were saying, that's not my purpose, that's not what I'm doing. And as much as I would love to do that, there are so many accounts on Instagram and stuff that are now using that platform to raise awareness about rape culture. And this one guy was like, there's no such thing as rape culture, and I was like, you have literally just said that this girl's going to get raped if she's wearing a short skirt. Excuse me, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, I get so mad. I get so mad, because that's what rape culture is. And he's like, there's no such thing. I'm like, but you literally just nailed it. Like, yes, there is. And that's what I think is great, that there's people that are focusing on that area. And as much as I do like to do it a little bit, like sometimes I'll share things and I'm like, oh my God, like this is crazy, like what's going on? Or like, this is so true. Like when I see people, you know, say something, I'm like, this is what it is. But I'm definitely trying to sort of keep my focus on the whole like empowering side, and to sort of like help survivors to move forward in their journey, rather than sort of focus on that. Because I think as well, one of the other things is like, when you start seeing it so much, it can just really frustrate and anger you, that it's then like, I'm getting sucked back into the badness of it all. And as much as like we need to know that it's there and be aware of it, sometimes it's kind of like, my mental capacity isn't for that right now. Like, I totally get it. And at one point I was like, I want to go to schools, I want to talk to kids, I want to like do this and do that. And I still definitely have that sort of passionate side about it, but I actually know right now I want to be helping the people that know what I'm feeling or what we've been through and stuff like that. And like, that's the goal of the Trauma Champions right now. So it's just so hard, because there's so many different aspects of things, like all types of trauma.
When those people who don't necessarily sit now might actually come to you, unfortunately, like say if they're going to come across a circumstance, you know, you never know what will happen in someone's life. And like, I think I found it, like, I don't know if you experienced this, but I like lost a few friendships over the years, like not through it wasn't like a major, you know, falling out or a confrontation. It was just, I had a few friends that they just couldn't understand what I was going through, and it wasn't, I think they tried, but I think we were just on such different paths, and some of them were people I'd gone to school with, and some of them were sort of people I'd met through my dance career, and they just couldn't understand why. So, you know, sometimes my mental health would nosedive, and for me, I'd always pull back, and I know it's difficult with friendships, like, because I know that I would sort of disappear, and I would always let people know, but I just say, you know, I'm having a difficult time, I can't really be social right now. And I think some friends just ended up getting frustrated. And I had one friend who basically sort of called me out on it and sort of said, you know, like, at some point you have to get past this. And I think I found it so hurtful at the time, but I can now reflect quite a lot and think, I don't know what journey they've been on. Perhaps they've been through in the past that I'm actually, even though we've been friends for years, I might just not know about it. And seeing this in me is triggering them. Like, I actually don't know. We don't really have a full, you know, CCTV constant image of, you know, somebody else's life. And so I was just feeling rejected and hurt and, you know, like all these feelings, but actually I didn't know where that came from. And I had to just sort of let go of the pain of it and just think, if they don't understand, then I'm glad that they've never been through something similar. And if they're rejecting me because they have been through something similar, then I wish them well. And then maybe at some point they're gonna reconnect. But it's sort of, that was something that I couldn't have planned ahead for. I think it was a real shock to me to realise that as part of, you know, moving forward and growing as a person, I would lose some friends along the way, and it's just like a natural part of the process. But it, you know, and obviously in like sometimes like those insecure moments, you might want to, it's like a very typical habit to want to hold on to people and to sort of hold them a bit tighter, but essentially,
well, yeah, they're your comfort blanket up until that point, aren't they? Like, they're your person you lean on, so it's then like all of a sudden,
are they your comfort blanket? That's the thing.
Exactly.
Are they really your comfort blanket though? That's the thing.
No, obviously not, because like then you end up losing them as a friend. But I think at the time, because if that's been like a solid part of your life up until then, what's happened to you, you have that kind of expectation where they're still going to be there for you. They're still going to be that solid thing that you can lean on. And then all of a sudden, if they're not, it's a real shock. And then I actually had this conversation recently with someone. I was like, I have lost so much because of what I went through. And I like have experienced so much pain, and it's like I just don't want that going forward anymore. And it's kind of like, I think for me, one of the things of then finding other survivors was huge, like because it is that thing. Like, I remember when I first had a conversation with a girl, and we'd actually met through social media because she'd done a podcast and I had done another podcast, and we then were like, oh my gosh, like, you know, let's meet up. And when you talk to someone, and like, it's cliche, but like literally I know how you feel, was like, oh, I was like, that was like my moment of like, oh my god, like this is what I've needed. Because I think everyone around you will try, like the people that, you know, are then the solid units, like your family, or, you know, just, you know, like USB, like things like that. It's like they'll still try to make you feel better. Like, they'll still try and lift you up, but they're still never going to quite know what's going on in your mind, or what you're thinking, or like why you're behaving certain ways. And I think that's a really hard thing, especially if you're someone that kind of like I did. I was then always running away from it. I was continuously just doing stuff. And like, even my mum said to me, she's like, but I always thought you had your shit together. And I'm like, that's the hard part of it, because it's then like they still don't quite get what you're going through. And it was like then starting to find the community of people, you're then like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. And I definitely lost a few friends. I'll never forget, like I was sat with the girl that was meant to be like my best friend at the time, and I would kind of try and talk to her a little bit about it, like what I was feeling, what I was going through, and she would just start talking about something else. And I was like, it was not like she was even talking about something else with the conversation. And for me, I found that really hard, because I was like I guess I felt like I was then doing something wrong even more, because I was like, I don't know how to talk. Like, I don't know how to now I can't have a conversation with you about normal stuff, because my mind is so consumed with everything else, that it was then just like, unfortunately, that friendship just had to end. And I found that, again, another struggle of like, wow, like this is really shit.
I've got a question for both of you just on this. You're talking about friends, right? And friends that maybe you outgrow, or they just don't get it, they don't get your situation, and you kind of just part ways. What about when it comes to family members?
Yeah.
If you haven't had any like that, then fine. But what would you say to people if they are struggling to even get family members to understand? Probably the most hardest ones, because they're your closest. But what would you say to them, and how would you get around that?
I think, because I get both sides of it in inquiry. So sometimes I get people reaching out to me through my website saying, I've got, my daughter or my cousin or somebody, and she's in this abusive relationship, and I'm just banging my head against the wall because she just won't leave this person. And it's, I care about her, but I'm getting to the point where I don't think I can talk to her anymore. And they tend to reach out to me as a bit of like a last ditch, like, I don't know what to do. And then I also have it where I get people inquiring saying, my family don't understand. I feel like I keep trying to explain where I'm at and they're not getting it. And so I hear both sides of it. And I get both sides in that, when you love somebody, you don't want to see them in pain, and you don't want to, and from an outside view, it can be really impossible to understand, because it's impossible to understand from the inside, why you would stay with an abusive person. And it's a huge thing to explain to somebody that hasn't been through it. And so I think that one of the main things that I always say to anyone that actually does get in touch, because obviously their intentions are good if they're contacting me, like worried about this person in their life, is just, you don't have to understand to still be able to support. So you don't have to have answers. And actually, survivors or victims, or however you're going to phrase it, like, they don't necessarily want your answers. And like you said, like earlier with your coaching clients and things, people have to find the answers themselves. And like, people are aware that they can leave, and they are aware that there's other relationships, and but it's being able to be there for somebody without either sort of jumping in with, I think you should do this is what I would do, and also it's totally fine to say, I don't actually know what to say to you, but I'm totally here, and that's it. Like, you don't.
So what? So much better, right? Saying that than be like, do this, do that, do this, and because that just makes it worse, a whole lot worse.
And all it's going to do is essentially probably damage your relationship with that person, and then that person ends up isolated even more. Like, one of the most dangerous parts of the later stages of an abusive relationship is total isolation, because that's part of what the abuser is trying to achieve, is to get that person on themselves. And if they can get you away from the people that make you feel good, because that empowerment thing, like Alexa was saying, is vital. And if they can like manage to pull you away from any empowerment sources, then they have total control over you. So that's why I sort of try and really like emphasize to people that get in touch with me, is just, I know it's difficult, and I know you probably supported your sister or cousin or whoever it is a million times, but maybe you just have to be there a few times more, and have the faith, and remind them that you can. It's okay to say, there are resources out there, I can help you. But I mean, I had a flood of messages over lockdown, and I ended up setting up like a free mentoring service, which essentially, at the beginning, my plan was to direct the domestic violence victims to further services that could support them. And actually, zero amount of those people, out of like 30 odd that got in touch during lockdown, wanted guidance. They didn't want to be sent anywhere. They didn't want referrals. All they wanted to do was tell me what was happening. So in the end, I set up like a safe, confidential number on WhatsApp, and people would just record voice notes where they just told me everything that was going on, and that was it. And quite often they then block that number. They wouldn't speak again, because they would just say, I'm not ready to leave, but I just need to tell someone what is happening, because I can't tell people in my life because they'll try and intervene, or they'll worry, or I don't want to upset people. And actually, that was, it's a form of empowerment, and it's difficult to listen to, because obviously I'm thinking, but you could leave, you could go here, you could do this. And of course I have those responses, same as anyone else. But I think all of us in lockdown, and actually in general life, just need an outlet to speak without being judged. And to speak without thinking, oh God, what's that person going to think? And are they going to think I'm really weak? And what if they think, and it's just, and these voice notes sometimes would be like 20 minutes long, and they'd have just gone for a walk, and they'd just tell me everything that was happening. And I think it was just a release, and that was the best way I could help during lockdown. I can't rescue people. I can't go around in a van picking people up and redistributing them. Like, they have to, they're going to find their journey. And I hope that some of them will leave and they'll move on and find escape. But that was the best freedom I could provide at that time, was just a space for people to talk. So it's like the simple things. So really, it is sort of going back to your original question. It is hard when family members don't understand, but it's still that thing like we were mentioning earlier about some people. They've had something in their life and it's triggered that, and they can't deal with it when it's in front of them. Sometimes they just haven't been there and they don't get it. But the main thing I'm recommending to everybody, no matter what side you're on, is just being able to listen without, having an opinion or feeling like you need to do something to feel like you've done something, like just give away that ego moment and just be there. Like, it's really simple, actually.
There's one thing
I think people do find it hard though.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I was just going to say quickly, that's one thing I've learned through coaching, is that listening is so much more powerful than speaking. like
yeah.
on a whole nother level. If you can deep listen, like properly deep listen,
Yeah.
without being able to interrupt,
Favourite.
bloody hell, like miracles occur. Go on, Alexa, sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, I was just going to say, like, I think some people find that really hard if they feel really passionate about the subject. Like, I know it's a few people that are like that, and they then can be very strong with their opinion. That I'm like, you need to be careful, because the person that you're talking to is then going to start feeling embarrassed if they don't follow through with what your thoughts are on it, because it's very hard when you're in that for people to just be able to walk away from situations, or, you know, they've got their own thought process around it, and just because it doesn't match yours doesn't mean it's wrong. Like, you just have to give people time. Like, I always think time's a big thing. I think the one thing that I guess I would worry, I don't know, you know, maybe like more so for your situation, is like if you've got people sending those voice notes, and then it's like it becomes a situation of, you know, perhaps, you know, like life or death. Like, unfortunately, domestic violence, that can happen so often, and it's like, how do you then deal with that? Like, because if you were to think, oh my god, someone's really in danger, like, does it fall on you to then feel like, oh my god, I need to send the police round? Like, I think that's the kind of stuff I think maybe people might worry about, because it's like that, you know, if it's their daughter, like, my daughter's in real danger right now, and they're not leaving, like, how do you deal with that?
I make it really clear that obviously I can't, like, you know, I say to them at the beginning of the conversation when they first get in touch, you know, I can put you through, and I can provide, you know, support, and I, you know, whatever's happening, and I remind them of it. And there's, you know, sometimes if they send several messages, sometimes they want me to reply and they'll ask my advice on something, and I will send them resources and support, and obviously, like, you know, further hotlines and people they can contact. But essentially, like, I can't, it's all like I operate quite a similar format with it as the Samaritans does. So the Samaritans organisation have it that they don't, the whole thing is that they listen and they don't offer like advice, and they don't take over, and actually that's what makes people come to it. And I've called the Samaritans in the past when I was really struggling, particularly in the year after I left that relationship. I was very, very depressed and really struggling, and I called them quite a few times, and actually it was a release to just speak to somebody that wasn't going to try and send me anywhere. But it is hard. And like, you know, I was speaking to a young girl, she was actually speaking to me quite regularly over a couple of months over the lockdown, and she's got a really young daughter, and she's in a situation that's very violent, and she wanted to leave and go, you know, she sort of made a plan to go and stay with family, but then her family were worried about quarantining and the bubbles and all this stuff, so they basically said, sorry, can you just wait a bit? And it's like heartbreaking to hear that, because I'm like, no, because
oh gosh, she's so close.
And, you know, she still checks in with me every now and then, and she's still trying to find her way out. And, you know, and like, I know that in my own circumstances, you know, obviously my family didn't really know they knew that I was suffering, and they could see that I was suffering, but I didn't want the help. And my mum, they didn't know the full extent really what was happening until afterwards. And my mum will still say, but I wish I'd done something, and I wish I'd come and just taken you from the house, and I wish I'd done this, but I would have just gone back. And, you know, essentially I had to make the choice to leave myself. Like, I had to find that for myself to leave. And it's incredibly difficult. And, you know, there are situations of femicide happens, like, you know, there's, you know, and it's horrendous and so heartbreaking.
What's that, sorry? Femicide.
So it's like, yeah, it's sort of a term that's come out of like the Me Too movement, and it's sort of essentially the murder of women. And like, this is, you know, there's this huge statistic, and it went up during from domestic violence situations. And it's, you know, because it's like the American term homicide for like murder, and it's essentially it's, yeah, and it's, you know, you can't save somebody like from certain situations like while it's happening, and because without knowing about it. And I encourage everybody that I speak to get the support that they deserve, and but the most difficult thing is that abusive relationships teach you that you're not worthy of better care, and they also, you know, completely manipulate you into thinking that there isn't support. And that, you know, a lot of people were saying to me during lockdown, oh, but I've read everywhere in the newspaper that all the domestic violence refugees are overwhelmed. I'm like, that's fine, and that's true, and, you know, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be seeking help. It doesn't mean that you have to wait for a few months. It, like, you know, I think mental health is the most important thing that to take care of. Like, it's the center of our well-being, and it's not okay to put it off for a few months. Like, if you're feeling like your life isn't worth living at the moment, that can't wait. That's like this has to happen today type thing. But yeah, so it's such a thing to balance.
Bloody
But I think
hell.
talking is the key. That's what I think, like
Yeah.
podcasts like this one, they're like vital, because the more we talk about it, the more you get it out there, the more these conversations are happening, the freer people are, like
100%.
and the more they have, like, you know, the toolkit of vocab and language to be able to express what's happening to them, because it's hard to describe. And you know, if we have podcasts like this one, it sort of gives somebody a reference point, and you know, even if one person thinks, well, actually that does sort of resonate with me, and why is it resonating, then that's basically our aim. So I think, yeah, it's powerful.
I mean, yeah, good. Do you know what? It's so, Joe was so good. I think this is like a ridiculously powerful conversation. I really do. Even just to help one person out of this. Right, got about 5 minutes left. Alexa,
so quick.
Alexa Taylor, tell us the mission, the dream for the Trauma Champions. What is it?
So it's definitely focused on the empowerment side of things. Like for me, like I said a little bit earlier on, when I did an empowerment day, and that was actually through sort of like my modelling work, the lift that I felt from that was so empowering, as it is. And I was just like, wow, like just because you've been through what you've been through, you don't need to be held back in life. Like I didn't realise how much what I had gone through was holding me back. And it was going through that, I was like, wow, like I can really actually move forward with my life. And I had been doing counselling, and I was doing sort of like various other bits to sort of like help myself, and I went through a really tough phase of feeling lost. And I do think that that's something I still struggle with now. I kind of forget who I am sometimes, and I struggle a lot with like what people think of me and stuff like that. But sort of focusing on that positivity and that drive of moving forward was just so me. I really want other people to feel the same thing, and that you don't have to live a life of being a victim. You can be a survivor, you can be a thriver, you can keep forward things that you want to do in life, the things that you enjoy in life. Like it's a very hard thing to overcome, and there are always going to be, you know, different PTSD things, or you know, just triggers and just situations that you're going to find yourself in because of what you've been through, but it doesn't have to stop you. And I think for me, like being able to rebuild my life around that was just massive, because I just couldn't find that. And you know, rape crisis and everything, they're amazing, the work they do is just so important. But I actually went to them with an empowerment day. I said, can I do an empowerment day for the like, survivors that are in like your questions? I know. And I felt really like disappointed, and I was like, oh my god, I was like, that literally changed my life. Like I really want other people to get this. So the idea of Trauma Champions is, we're not a counselling service, it's not therapy, it's to bring people together to get involved in empowering activities that then they can actually use to move forward as well. So I've created what are called the huddles, and I wanted to use the huddles because workshops just sounds a bit like not everyone can go to a workshop. I was like, get-togethers just sounds like you're just going to be in a room and like just chat, and I wanted something that like you knew you were coming together to like support one another, but you'd be doing something at the same time. So the huddles are all based around creativity. I'm a really creative person, like I've always been a creative person, and when I was going through my loss phase, I did lots of different creative activities to then kind of like find myself again. But also there's obviously a massive link with creativity as therapeutic. So I was like, get yourself involved in something that's creative but also then can help you move forward. So like one of them is to decorate your own journal. So journaling is a really, really great tool to use, but then I hated trying to find journals that were like me. I was like, I want something that makes me feel good, or like, you know, all that kind of stuff. So the first one will be about that. Then I've got one that's like to create an empowerment patch bag, and it's all focused on like female empowerment and like, you know, using affirmations. And another one is about affirmations. So the whole idea of the huddles, there's 5 of them in total, is just to help empower you that, you know, you can use these things to move forward, but they're still creative, so you've got some space to do something that's not thinking about your thoughts and feelings, but also you're then in a room with survivors that if you want to talk, you can. And I think, you know, for me, when it came to doing like group therapy, it was too intimidating at the time. Like the thought of sitting in a circle and trying to talk to people, I just wasn't ready for that. And, you know, it is an amazing tool, you know, to talk to survivors, but I was a bit like, well, how can we, you know, lessen that sort of like, you must talk, but you can be with other survivors. So that was kind of how it came up. My initial idea was to do it as a social enterprise like Liberte, but I went through the Princess Trust enterprise program, and they were like, you have to sort of like run it as a business, and it's then more of like basically like I myself paid for a personal therapist, and they were like, you kind of have to view it a little bit like that, like these are very particular activities, so you know, if people want to come together, it's, you know, the cost of it is then just basically covering the overheads. It's not, I'm not doing it for money, I'm not doing it for profit or anything, it's just purely to give people another source of being able to move themselves forward, basically. And for me, the whole sort of idea is it's building blocks to help you move forward. You know, and I will very much do the same thing. Like if someone comes to me, I'll say like, maybe you should go and speak to this person, or, you know, I'm not a therapy service, but it's definitely knowing that you can talk to someone who knows how you're feeling. Whilst feeling good, I guess, like knowing that you can move forward. That is the goal. So,
and how do people get in contact with the Trauma Champions?
So it's on Instagram, literally as the Trauma Champions, and there's also a website, www.thetraumachampions.co.uk. So yeah, they are up and running. It literally launched this beginning of this summer. That was also really empowering in itself, and you know, I think the amount of fears and worries that I had about doing that,
you had so many before.
It was I remember
speaking to you about it. But you know what, fair play, you broke through and you launched it, and that's the main thing, and the feedback you got off it was amazing. So fair play. Helen, give us a little snapshot about where you want to take Living Liberty, and what the dream or mission is about it.
Yeah, well, I was really amazed that and very fortunate that I managed to get some funding from an amazing company called Unlimited. So they're funding me at the moment to write ebooks, which I'm going to be selling on the website. There's going to be guidance ebooks, actually one specifically about how to help a friend in an abusive situation. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, one about dealing with anxiety. So I'm launching them in the next couple of months. Which would be cool. And then, because my plan was to do workshops in schools and talk to sort of young people about healthy relationship building, but with everything's happening and the school option isn't happening, so I'm just focusing my work on digital products basically, and just, which is what the blog originally was. It's just, you know, the blog was just a platform where I could share articles that people could access and to empower themselves. So it's just really just sort of just growing other products off of that, really. And just continuing the same message. I think we're really aligned in knowing that empowerment is the key, because you can, I don't know, you could write a whole handbook or hand out, you know, psychological analysis of abuse and the signs and this and that, and like all the so-called rules, although they vary depending on your boundaries. But without empowerment, it cannot apply. Like even after I'd been in that abusive situation and I was writing the blog and speaking about domestic violence, I ended up in a really, really toxic relationship with another guy that I met when I was touring in America, and it was a disaster. And I thought, how I'm writing about this stuff, so how can I not? And I can see the signs, and yet I'm still in this. And but it's because I didn't have any self-confidence yet. And without self-confidence, there's no point having all, you know, I can do all the training in the world, but if I can't apply it and I can't say, do you know what, there's a boundary here and you're on the other side of it, then it's nothing really. So I think education is key, but empowerment is like the foundation of all, basically.
Love that.
Wow. Right. Jesus Christ, mate. I mean, this is one great podcast. Thank you so much for coming on, Helen and Alexa. Both amazing, powerful humans, and we will stay in contact. And I'm glad I got you two on at the same time as well. So hopefully you'll stay in contact too. If you're still listening and you've got this far, thank you so much for listening. Please do drop us a message. I will put all the links below for all of your Instagrams, your websites, everything. If you want to get in contact with either Alexa or Helen, you can do that, or myself. I will put my links as well. Thank you so much. There's nothing more to say, but have an amazing day and an amazing life. Let's celebrate life.
Exactly.
Thank you. See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Ignite Your Mind podcast. This is a safe place for real talk and discovering powerful stories, talking about mental health, real business journeys, and hearing inspiring stories. Please do subscribe if you are listening to this on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, and leave me a comment. And more importantly, share this with anyone who you think may take value from it. New podcasts every Friday at 12 p.m. I look forward to seeing you next week.